9-year-old boy with a broken arm carried his baby brother out of their burning trailer at midnight when firefighters asked how the fire started. His terrified answer about their stepfather's punishment left everyone speechless. Caleb Winters could taste freedom in the crisp Maine autumn air. The second-hand Schwinn bicycle beneath him wobbled slightly as he picked up speed down Cedar Lane, the main unpaved road cutting through Lakeside Trailer Park. For these precious few minutes, with the wind rushing through his sandy brown hair and the late afternoon sun warming his back, he was just a regular 9-year-old boy without worries that stretched far beyond his years. The trailer park formed its own little world on the outskirts of Lakeside, Maine, a town whose name had become increasingly ironic as the actual lake grew more polluted each year from the paper mill that provided most of the local jobs. Today, though, Caleb wasn't thinking about adult problems like water pollution or the mill's threatened layoffs. His mind was filled with the simple joy of making the dirt beneath his tires crunch and watching his shadow race alongside him, stretching longer as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. "Gonna be late. Gotta get back," he reminded himself, glancing at the Mickey Mouse watch on his wrist, a rare gift from his mother on his last birthday. Theo would be waking up from his nap soon, and Caleb needed to be there. His mother wouldn't be home from her first shift at the diner for another hour, and his stepfather, Robert, would be asleep before his night shift at the mill. That meant Theo was Caleb's responsibility, as he had been almost since the day his half-brother was born 18 months ago. As Caleb rounded the bend near the Hendersons' lot, a blur of brown and white fur darted in front of his bike. Mrs. Henderson's terrier, Rusty, had escaped his chain again. Caleb swerved hard to avoid hitting the dog, his right hand gripping the handlebar in a white-knuckled panic while his left hand fumbled for the brake. The front wheel caught on a protruding root, and the world suddenly tilted. The bicycle went one way, and Caleb went another, his thin body airborne for a heart-stopping moment before he crashed down hard onto the packed dirt and gravel. Pain exploded through his left arm as he landed awkwardly, taking the brunt of the impact. A sickening crack accompanied the fall, drowned out by Caleb's involuntary cry of pain. Rusty barked excitedly, circling the fallen boy as if it were all part of some game. "Get away, Rusty. Go home," Caleb gasped through teeth clenched against the pain. He sat up slowly, cradling his left arm, which hung at an unnatural angle below the elbow. Even through the haze of shock and pain, his first coherent thought was, "How am I going to take care of Theo with a broken arm?" Mrs. Henderson emerged from her trailer, cigarette dangling from her lips, her faded housecoat flapping in the breeze. "Jesus Christ, kid, you all right?" she called, shuffling toward him in worn slippers. "Rusty, shut your damn yapping." Caleb nodded automatically, the practiced response of a child accustomed to saying he was fine regardless of the truth. But Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened when she saw his arm. "You ain't all right. That arm's broken for sure." She took a final drag from her cigarette and flicked it away. "Come on, I'll drive you to the hospital." "Your mom at work?" "Yes, ma'am," Caleb replied, his voice tight with pain as he stood shakily. "But I can't go yet. Theo's asleep in the trailer. I have to be there when he wakes up." Mrs. Henderson's lined face softened slightly. Even in the hardscrabble community of Lakeside Trailer Park, Caleb's dedication to his baby brother was well known. "Your stepdad home?" "He's sleeping. Night shift." Caleb glanced anxiously toward his family's trailer, a faded blue single-wide with peeling trim at the end of the lane. "Well, he's gonna have to wake up. Can't leave a baby alone, and you need a hospital. Come on." The walk to his trailer seemed to take forever, each step sending jolts of pain up Caleb's arm. The yard was cluttered with Robert's half-finished projects. A lawnmower in perpetual repair, plastic crates filled with miscellaneous parts, empty beer cans tipped over by the evening breeze. Caleb hesitated at the metal steps leading to the door. "Go on, knock," Mrs. Henderson urged. "Or you want me to?" "I'll do it," Caleb said quickly. Despite the pain, he was more afraid of someone else waking Robert the wrong way. His stepfather had very specific ideas about how he should be addressed, especially when being woken up. Caleb had learned those rules through painful trial and error. He rapped on the door with his good hand, using the precise pattern that Robert preferred. 2 quick knocks followed by a pause and then one more. After an agonizing wait, heavy footsteps approached the door, and it swung open to reveal Robert Mercer, his broad frame filling the doorway. At 35, Robert still maintained the muscular build of his high school football days, though a beer belly had begun to form beneath his stained white undershirt. His dark hair was mussed from sleep, and his eyes were bloodshot with a dangerous gleam that Caleb recognized immediately. Robert had been drinking before his nap, never a good sign. "The hell's this about?" Robert growled, looking from Caleb to Mrs. Henderson. "Boys had an accident," Mrs. Henderson explained, gesturing to Caleb's clearly broken arm. "Needs to get to the hospital. I can drive him, but someone's got to stay with the baby." Robert's eyes narrowed as they settled on Caleb's injury. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Not concern, but calculation. "What did you do?" he demanded. I was riding my bike," Caleb stammered. "Rusty ran out and—" "Jesus Christ," Robert interrupted, rubbing a hand across his stubbled jaw. "Your mother's gonna flip out. Just what we need, more medical bills." He glared at Caleb as if the broken arm were a deliberate act of financial sabotage. A thin wail rose from inside the trailer, Theo awakening from his nap, right on schedule. Caleb instinctively moved toward the sound, but Mrs. Henderson put a firm hand on his shoulder. "He needs a doctor," she insisted. "I'll take him now if you'll mind the little one." Robert's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Fine. Take him. I'll call Fiona at the diner." His eyes locked onto Caleb's. "And you better not make a fuss about it. We don't need social workers poking around asking questions just 'cause you got clumsy. You understand me, boy?" "Yes, sir," Caleb answered automatically, reading the warning in Robert's gaze. It was a familiar one. "Don't tell anyone our business. Don't make us look bad. Or else." The ride to Lakeside Community Hospital in Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick was a blur of pain and anxiety for Caleb. His arm throbbed relentlessly, but his mind was preoccupied with worries about Theo. Would Robert remember to check if Theo's diaper was wet? Would he know that Theo needed his stuffed rabbit to fall back asleep? Would he lose his temper if Theo cried too much? "You're awful quiet over there," Mrs. Henderson remarked, stealing glances at him while navigating the potholed roads. "Must hurt like hell." "It's okay," Caleb said automatically. Mrs. Henderson snorted. "Ain't okay. Bone's not supposed to bend that way." After a pause, she added more gently, "You're a tough kid, Caleb Winters. Too tough for your own good sometimes, I think." The emergency room was mercifully quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. Caleb sat rigidly in a molded plastic chair while Mrs. Henderson handled the paperwork, his good arm clutching his injured one close to his chest. The fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unnatural. He'd only been to the hospital once before, when Theo was born. That had been exciting and scary in a different way. "Caleb Winters?" A nurse in blue scrubs appeared with a clipboard. "We're ready for you now." Mrs. Henderson gave him an encouraging pat on the shoulder. "I'll wait right here, kid. Don't worry." The examination room was small and smelled strongly of disinfectant. The nurse helped Caleb onto the paper-covered table, her movements efficient but gentle. "I'm Karen," she said, offering a warm smile. "Let's get your vitals first, and then the doctor will be in to look at that arm." "Can you tell me how this happened?" "I fell off my bike," Caleb explained, wincing as she carefully rolled up his sleeve. "There was a dog, and I swerved." Karen nodded, wrapping a blood pressure cuff around his right arm. "That must have been scary. You're being very brave." Caleb wasn't sure how to respond to that. He wasn't being brave. He just knew that crying or complaining wouldn't help anything. Robert had made that clear enough over the years. Dr. Levine arrived moments later, a woman with curly gray hair and glasses that hung from a beaded chain around her neck. She introduced herself and immediately set about examining Caleb's arm, her touch careful but clinical. "This is definitely broken," she confirmed after a brief examination. "We'll need x-rays to see exactly where and how badly. But before we do that, I need to check the rest of you to make sure nothing else was injured in the fall. Can you lift your shirt for me?" Caleb hesitated, his heart rate quickening. "It's just my arm that hurts," he said quickly. "Dr. Levine's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened slightly. "It's standard procedure, Caleb. We need to make sure you don't have any other injuries you might not have noticed because you're focused on your arm." Reluctantly, Caleb lifted his shirt with his right hand. Dr. Levine's practiced hands gently probed his ribs and abdomen, checking for any signs of internal injury. Her movements faltered slightly when she reached his back, and Caleb knew what she had found. "Caleb," she said, her voice measured, "you have some bruising on your back that doesn't look like it came from today's fall. Can you tell me how you got these marks?" Caleb's mind raced to the rehearsed explanation. "I was wrestling with my friends at school last week," he said, the lie practiced and smooth. "We play rough sometimes." Dr. Levine studied his face for a long moment. "These bruises are in a very specific pattern," she observed. "Almost like stripes." Caleb met her gaze steadily. "Tommy's backyard has these wooden slats by the fence. I fell against them when we were playing." The explanation came easily. He'd had variations of this conversation before with teachers and school nurses. Something in Dr. Levine's expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced, but she didn't press further. Instead, she made a note on his chart and proceeded with arranging for the x-rays. The process of setting his arm and applying the cast took nearly 2 hours. By the time they finished, Caleb's mother had arrived, her diner uniform still on beneath her worn jacket, worry etched across her face. Fiona Winters had once been pretty in a delicate way, her features now sharpened by stress and too many missed meals. At 32, she looked a decade older, with premature lines around her eyes and mouth and gray streaking her auburn hair. She worked double shifts most days, serving breakfast and lunch at the lakeside diner before moving to the cocktail waitress position at the attached bar in the evenings. The jobs barely kept them afloat, but she clung to them with the determination of a woman who knew how few options existed in a town like Lakeside. "Oh, Caleb," she sighed, rushing to his side as Dr. Levine finished explaining the care instructions for the cast. "Are you okay, baby?" "I'm fine, Mom," Caleb assured her, relieved to see her but also anxious about her missing work. "It doesn't hurt much now." Fiona turned to the doctor. "Thank you for taking care of him. I came as soon as Robert called." She twisted the strap of her purse nervously. "About the bill, we don't have insurance, but I can set up a payment plan." Dr. Levine nodded with professional sympathy. "The front desk can help you with that." She hesitated, then added, "Mrs. Winters, I noticed some unusual bruising on Caleb's back during my examination. He explained it was from rough play with friends, but I wanted to bring it to your attention." Fiona's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "Boys do play rough," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "His friend Tommy has a backyard they're always roughhousing in. I've told them to be more careful." She placed a protective hand on Caleb's shoulder. "I appreciate your concern, though." Dr. Levine held Fiona's gaze for a moment before nodding. "The cast will need to stay on for about 6 weeks. If you notice any problems, increased pain, swelling, fingers turning blue, bring him back immediately." The ride home was quiet. Mrs. Henderson had left after Fiona arrived, and now mother and son sat in Fiona's ancient Honda Civic, the heater struggling against the evening chill. Halfway home, Fiona pulled into the empty parking lot of a closed convenience store and turned to face her son. "Caleb," she said, her voice low and urgent. "What did you tell the doctor about those bruises?" "Just what we practiced," Caleb replied, recognizing the fear behind her question. "I said I was playing with friends and fell against some wooden slats." She wrote it down but didn't ask anything else. Fiona exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Good. That's good," She reached out to brush his hair back from his forehead, her touch gentle. "I'm sorry about your arm, baby. I really am. But we need to be careful what we say to doctors and teachers. You know that, right?" "I know, Mom," Caleb said, understanding far more than any 9-year-old should about the precarious balance of their lives. If Robert was reported, if social services got involved, they could lose their home, maybe even be separated. At least, that's what his mother had always told him. "Robert's mad about the medical bills," Fiona admitted, staring out at the darkening parking lot. "He says we'll have to cut back on groceries for a while to make the payments." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I'm going to pick up some extra shifts at the bar. Linda owes me a favor." "I'm sorry," Caleb said reflexively, guilt washing over him. Even with a broken arm, he was already calculating how he could still help, how he could still care for Theo, still clean up around the trailer, still avoid becoming another burden in their struggling household. "It's not your fault, baby," Fiona replied, though her tired eyes belied her words. "Accidents happen." When they returned to the trailer, Robert was sitting in his recliner, nursing a beer and watching a basketball game on their small television. Theo was on the floor nearby, contentedly stacking and knocking over plastic cups. A good sign that Robert hadn't lost his temper with the toddler. "How much?" Robert asked without preamble, his eyes flicking to Caleb's cast before settling on Fiona. "They're sending the bill," Fiona replied, hanging her jacket on the hook by the door. "I'll work it out with the hospital." Robert grunted, taking another swig of beer. "Blue cast, huh?" he remarked, looking at Caleb with a mixture of disdain and something darker. "Pretty color for a boy. They didn't have anything more manly?" Caleb hadn't been given a choice of colors, but he knew better than to say so. "Sorry, sir," he mumbled instead, moving toward Theo, who had spotted him and was babbling excitedly, arms outstretched. "Hey, little buddy," Caleb said softly, awkwardly kneeling to let Theo touch the cast with curious fingers. His half-brother was a sturdy toddler with a mop of dark curls and their mother's green eyes, the only person in Caleb's life who seemed genuinely happy to see him every time. "Cast," Caleb explained to Theo's puzzled expression. "Caleb has a cast because he hurt his arm." "K-but," Theo repeated, one of his few clear words. He patted the hard surface of the cast, then reached up to touch Caleb's face with surprising gentleness, as if sensing his brother's pain. "Yeah, that's right, Caleb." He smiled, the tension in his chest easing slightly at Theo's innocent concern. Robert's voice cut through the moment. "So how are you going to pull your weight around here with that thing on your arm? Can't expect your mother to pick up all your slack when she's already working herself to the bone." Before Caleb could answer, Fiona intervened. "He's 9 years old, Robert, and he just broke his arm. I'm sure he'll still help as much as he can." "Nine's old enough to understand responsibility," Robert countered, his tone hardening. "My old man had me splitting firewood at his age. Didn't matter if I was sick or hurt, work still needed doing." He fixed Caleb with a pointed stare. "Life doesn't stop for broken bones, boy. Remember that." Caleb nodded, knowing better than to argue. In the 6 months since Robert had moved in with them after losing his apartment, he had quickly established his dominance over the household. At first, Fiona had seemed happy to have a partner, someone to share the burdens of single parenthood. Robert had been charming in those early days, bringing flowers from the supermarket clearance rack and small toys for Theo. But the charm had worn thin as finances tightened and Robert's drinking increased. Now, his old-fashioned discipline had become the unspoken shadow over their home. That night, after Fiona left for her evening shift at the bar and Robert settled in front of the television with another beer, Caleb faced his first major challenge with the cast. Theo needed a diaper change, a usually simple task now made complicated with only one functional hand. "Come on, Theo," he whispered, leading his brother to their shared bedroom. "Let's get you cleaned up." The bedroom was small, barely fitting Caleb's twin bed and Theo's converted crib. Faded Power Rangers decals, remnants from the trailer's previous occupants, peeled from the walls, and a single window with mismatched curtains looked out onto the Hendersons' lot next door. It wasn't much, but Caleb had arranged it carefully, keeping his few possessions neatly organized and making sure Theo's corner contained bright colors and soft textures. He laid Theo on the bed and fumbled awkwardly with the diaper tabs, his casted arm serving as a clumsy weight against which he could press Theo's squirming legs. It took 3 times longer than usual, and by the time he finished, sweat beaded on his forehead from the effort and concentration. "Success," he whispered triumphantly to Theo, who giggled in response. "We've got this, buddy. We'll figure it out." After getting Theo into pajamas, another challenge that required creative maneuvering, Caleb brought him out to the living area for his evening bottle. Robert barely acknowledged them, his eyes fixed on the game. Another empty beer can added to the growing collection on the side table. Caleb settled on the floor with Theo, carefully cradling the bottle with his good hand while his brother drank eagerly. "Bath night tomorrow," Robert remarked suddenly, his eyes still on the television. "You gonna manage that with one arm? Or am I gonna have to do it?" Caleb's stomach tightened at the thought of Robert bathing Theo. His stepfather was rough and impatient, treating the toddler like a thing to be scrubbed rather than a small person deserving of gentleness. "I can do it," Caleb said quickly. "I'll figure it out." Robert turned to look at him then, something calculating in his gaze. "That doctor ask any questions about those marks on your back?" "No, sir," Caleb lied smoothly. "She was just focused on my arm." Robert nodded slowly, seeming satisfied. "Good. Remember what I told you. Family business stays family business. Start telling tales out of school, and next thing you know, they're separating families. Putting kids in foster homes where God knows what happens to them." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You wouldn't want that for Theo, would you? Some stranger taking care of him, not knowing how he likes things." "No, sir," Caleb whispered, unconsciously pulling Theo closer against his chest. "That's right, because we're family, and family sticks together." Robert settled back in his recliner. "Even if sometimes we need to learn hard lessons." The hard lessons had begun about 3 months after Robert moved in. At first, they were conventional punishments, timeouts, early bedtimes, loss of TV privileges. But as Robert's dissatisfaction with his job and their financial situation grew, so did the severity of his discipline. It started with making Caleb stand in the corner for hours, then escalated to the utility closet, a claustrophobic space where Robert would lock him for minor infractions like spilling milk or taking too long with chores. The worst punishment came when Caleb had accidentally woken Robert during his pre-shift nap by dropping a pot while preparing Theo's lunch. Robert had dragged him outside in January, forcing him to stand in the snow in just his socks and t-shirt for 20 minutes, timing it on his watch while watching from the window. Caleb had gotten sick afterward, a heavy chest cold that lingered for weeks, but Fiona had been told he caught it at school. Through it all, Caleb had developed coping mechanisms, mental games to distract himself during punishments, techniques for moving silently around the trailer, and above all, strategies for protecting Theo from Robert's temper. So far, Robert had directed his anger only at Caleb, seeming to view the toddler as Fiona's responsibility and Caleb as a convenient outlet for his frustrations. Caleb intended to keep it that way, drawing Robert's attention whenever it might otherwise fall on his little brother. "Time for bed," he announced quietly to Theo, seeing the toddler's eyelids growing heavy. "Say night-night." "And Theo mumbled sleepily, his bottle empty and his body relaxing against Caleb's. Robert grunted in acknowledgement but didn't look away from the game. Caleb carried Theo back to their room, the weight challenging with just one good arm but manageable. He settled his brother in the crib with practiced movements, tucking the worn blue blanket around him and placing the stuffed rabbit, missing one ear and patched in several places, within easy reach. "Night, buddy," Caleb whispered, gently stroking Theo's curls until his breathing deepened into sleep. "I've still got you. Don't worry." Returning to the main room, Caleb began his evening routine of tidying up one-handed. He gathered Theo's scattered toys, wiped down the kitchen counter, and collected the empty beer cans for recycling, each task taking twice as long with his limited mobility. Robert watched him from the recliner, occasionally making critical comments about missed spots or Caleb's slowness. "You need to figure out how to work with that cast," he remarked as Caleb struggled to rinse a dish one-handed. "Can't expect special treatment for 6 weeks. World doesn't work that way." "Yes, sir," Caleb replied automatically, focusing on the task to avoid meeting Robert's eyes. He had learned that eye contact could sometimes be interpreted as a challenge, and challenges were met with lessons. By the time Fiona returned from her evening shift just after midnight, Caleb had managed to complete most of his usual chores and was exhausted from the effort and the lingering pain in his arm. He pretended to be asleep when she checked on him and Theo, not wanting her to worry about him on top of everything else. Through barely open eyes, he watched her gently adjust Theo's blanket before leaning down to press a kiss to Caleb's forehead, her hand lingering momentarily on his cast. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. "I'm going to make things better somehow. I promise." But as Caleb drifted into genuine sleep minutes later, the weight of his cast a constant reminder of his new limitation, he couldn't imagine how things would get better. The broken arm wasn't just a physical injury, it was a threat to the careful balance he maintained, a potential trigger for Robert's worsening temper, and most concerning of all, a hindrance to his ability to protect Theo. As consciousness faded, his last coherent thought was a mixture of determination and fear. "I have to be more careful now. For Theo's sake, I can't make any more mistakes." 2 weeks passed, and Caleb adapted to life with the cast as best he could. He developed new techniques for everyday tasks, bracing items against his chest to open them one-handed, using his teeth as an extra grip, leveraging the hard surface of the cast itself as a tool when possible. School became both a refuge and a challenge. His teacher, Mrs. Bryant, was understanding about his difficulty with writing and arranged for him to give some answers orally or type them on the classroom computer. His classmates were fascinated by the cast at first, asking to sign it and making up increasingly outlandish theories about how he'd broken it when the real story seemed too mundane. At home, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense as bills from the hospital began to arrive. Robert's resentment simmered, manifesting in cutting remarks about Caleb's clumsiness and the financial burden he'd created. Fiona worked even longer hours, sometimes not returning until Caleb and Theo were already asleep. The exhaustion showed on her face in the mornings as she rushed to get ready for her early shift, often pausing only long enough to press quick kisses to her sons' foreheads before hurrying out the door. Despite the challenges, Caleb maintained his role as Theo's primary caretaker. He mastered the art of one-handed diaper changes, developed a system for bathing his brother while keeping his cast dry, and could prepare simple meals like sandwiches and heated canned soup with careful, deliberate movements. The physical pain of his broken arm had subsided to a dull ache, but the psychological strain of navigating Robert's increasingly volatile moods was taking its toll. On a Thursday evening, with Fiona at work and a rare autumn thunderstorm rattling the windows of the trailer, everything changed. Caleb was cleaning up after dinner. Macaroni and cheese from a box, one of the few meals he could manage confidently with his cast. Theo was playing nearby with plastic measuring cups, stacking and unstacking them in a game of his own devising. Robert sat at the small kitchen table, nursing his fourth beer of the evening, brooding over a letter from the mill about potential layoffs in the coming months. "Nothing's ever enough," he muttered, crumpling the letter and tossing it aside. "Work my ass off at that place for 8 years, and they're talking about cutting my shift. Like we can afford that right now." Caleb stayed silent, focusing on wiping down the counter, careful not to engage Robert when he was in this mood. Theo babbled happily, oblivious to the tension, and knocked over his tower of cups with a delighted squeal. "Can't you keep him quiet?" Robert snapped, glaring at the toddler. "I'm trying to think here." "Come on, Theo," Caleb said immediately, moving to his brother's side. "Let's play in our room for a while." As he gathered Theo's cups, planning to redirect him to their bedroom, Caleb's cast bumped against the shelf above the counter. The vibration caused several items to shift, including a framed photograph of Robert's father, a stern-faced man in a hunting cap holding a massive trout. The frame teetered at the edge for a heart-stopping moment before crashing to the counter, the glass front shattering on impact. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by Theo's continued happy babbling, unaware of the catastrophe that had just occurred. Robert rose slowly from his chair, his face darkening as he approached the broken frame. "Do you have any idea," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "what you just did?" "I'm sorry," Caleb said quickly, his heart racing. "It was an accident. I can fix it. We can get new glass." "Fix it?" Robert picked up the frame, carefully removing the photograph from among the shards. "This was the last picture ever taken of my father before he died. The only thing I have of his. And you broke it because you're too damn clumsy to be careful with that cast." "I'm sorry," Caleb repeated, instinctively moving to position himself between Robert and Theo. "I didn't mean to." "You never mean to, do you?" Robert cut him off, his voice rising. "Never mean to cause problems. Never mean to cost us money we don't have. Never mean to break things that matter." He set the photograph down with exaggerated care, then turned to face Caleb fully. His expression hardened into something that made the boy's stomach clench with familiar dread. "Looks like you need a lesson in being more careful," Robert said, the calm in his voice more frightening than shouting would have been. "Go get the rice from the pantry." Caleb's blood ran cold. The rice punishment was one of Robert's more recent innovations. Uncooked grains spread on the hard kitchen floor, painful to kneel on for extended periods. He'd only used it once before, when Caleb had spilled bleach on Robert's work uniform. "Please," Caleb whispered, knowing it was useless but unable to stop himself. "I can clean it up. I'll be more careful. I promise. Rice. Now." Robert's tone left no room for negotiation. "Or I can come up with something worse." With shaking hands, Caleb retrieved the bag of rice from the pantry. Theo had sensed the change in atmosphere and was now watching with wide, uncertain eyes, his game forgotten. Caleb gave him a reassuring smile that felt brittle on his face. "It's okay, buddy," he said softly. "Just a grown-up thing. Nothing to worry about." Robert took the rice and poured a generous amount into a rough rectangle on the linoleum floor near the corner of the kitchen. "Kneel," he instructed, pointing to the grains. "Face the wall." Awkwardly, favoring his casted arm, Caleb lowered himself onto the rice. The pain was immediate, dozens of hard grains digging into his skin through his thin pajama pants. He positioned himself facing the corner as instructed, his back to the room. "How long?" he dared to ask, his voice barely audible. "Until I say," Robert replied. "And don't move. Not an inch. I'll know if you do." The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. The rice dug into Caleb's knees like tiny daggers, sending sharp pains up his legs. His broken arm throbbed in its cast, and his back ached from maintaining the rigid posture. Behind him, he could hear Robert cleaning up the broken glass, muttering under his breath about ungrateful kids and mounting expenses. Theo had gone quiet, something that worried Caleb more than if he'd been crying. He resisted the urge to turn and check on his brother, knowing that any movement would only prolong his punishment. After what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes, the phone rang. Robert answered it gruffly, his tone changing to something more controlled when he realized it was Fiona calling from work. "Everything's fine," Caleb heard him say. "Boys are good. Theo's playing, and Caleb's just sitting quiet for a bit." A pause. "Yeah, I know when my shift starts. Don't worry about it." Another pause. "No, nothing's wrong. Just tired. You working the full double tonight? All right, see you in the morning then." The call ended, and Robert approached Caleb, crouching down to speak directly into his ear. "Your mother's working until close. Won't be home till after 2. His breath was hot and sour with beer. "I've got to leave for my shift in an hour. You're gonna stay right here until then. Maybe this time the lesson will stick." "But Theo," Caleb began, concerned about his brother being unsupervised. "Is fine," Robert cut him off. "He can play where I can see him. You just worry about not moving from this spot. Not 1 inch, you understand me? Even after I leave. I'll know if you do." "Yes, sir," Caleb whispered, knowing it was a lie. Of course he would move once Robert left. Theo needed to be put to bed, needed his nighttime bottle, needed the comfort of his routine. But agreeing was the only option that wouldn't make things worse right now. Robert returned to his recliner, turning the TV volume up to watch a hockey game. Theo occasionally made his way into Caleb's limited peripheral vision, looking confused and increasingly distressed by his brother's strange position. Each time, Robert would gruffly direct him back to the living room area, growing more impatient with each interruption. The pain in Caleb's knees intensified as time passed, the rice grains feeling like they were embedding themselves into his skin. His broken arm ached dully, and his back muscles screamed from holding the rigid posture. He tried to distract himself by silently reciting multiplication tables in his head, then naming all the state capitals, coping techniques he'd developed during previous punishments. When the hour had nearly passed, Robert stood and stretched, glancing at his watch. "Time for work," he announced, gathering his lunchbox from the refrigerator. He walked over to where Caleb knelt, leaning down to speak in a low voice. "Remember what I said. Don't move until I'm gone at least 30 minutes. I'm tired of replacing things you break." He straightened up, his voice returning to normal volume. "Theo's already had dinner. Put him to bed when you're done here." Caleb kept his eyes fixed on the wall, not trusting himself to speak without his voice breaking. He heard Robert collect his keys and jacket, then pause by the door. "And clean up that rice when you're done. Don't leave a mess for your mother to find in the morning." The door opened and slammed shut, followed by the sound of Robert's truck starting up outside. Even after the truck's engine faded into the distance, Caleb remained frozen in position, terrified that Robert might have forgotten something and return unexpectedly. Only when Theo toddled over and patted his back with a concerned "K-but" did he finally allow himself to move. "It's okay, buddy," he whispered, his voice hoarse as he painfully shifted off the rice. His knees were red and deeply indented with the pattern of the grains, some of which had broken the skin. "I'm okay now. Let's get you ready for bed." Standing was an ordeal. His legs trembled and threatened to buckle, pins and needles shooting through his feet as circulation returned. Using the wall for support, he gradually straightened up, wincing at the protest from his stiffened muscles. Theo watched him with worried eyes, his lower lip quivering. The toddler was unusually subdued, as if sensing the wrongness of what he had witnessed. Caleb forced a smile and ruffled his brother's curls. "Bath time, then bed," he announced with false cheerfulness. "Want to pick a story for tonight?" The familiar routine of Theo's bedtime provided some comfort to them both. Caleb filled the small plastic tub in the bathroom sink with warm water, carefully bathing Theo while keeping his own cast dry. He helped his brother into clean pajamas, prepared his bottle, and settled into the single rocking chair in their bedroom to read Goodnight Moon, Theo's current favorite, before placing him in his crib. "Sleep tight, buddy," Caleb murmured, tucking the blue blanket around Theo's small form. "Everything's going to be fine." Once Theo had drifted off, Caleb returned to the kitchen to clean up the rice as instructed. Each movement was painful, his knees burning as the fabric of his pajamas brushed against the raw skin. Using a dustpan and his good hand, he swept up the grains, disposing of them in the trash. Then he carefully cleaned the glass fragments from Robert's broken picture frame, salvaging the photograph and placing it safely in a drawer. By the time he finished, exhaustion weighed on him like a physical burden. His whole body ached, and the emotional toll of the evening left him drained. Still, he performed one final check of the trailer, making sure the doors were locked, the space heater in the living room was properly positioned away from anything flammable, and Theo was sleeping peacefully, before finally allowing himself to collapse onto his own bed. Sleep came in fitful bursts, disturbed by pain and anxiety dreams where he was searching for Theo in a maze of endless trailer park lanes. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, he was awakened by a strange smell, acrid and chemical. Disoriented, he sat up in bed, his broken arm throbbing as a reminder of the day's events. The smell was stronger now, unmistakably smoke. Caleb's heart raced as he swung his legs over the side of the bed, wincing as his raw knees protested the movement. A soft orange glow flickered in the narrow gap beneath the bedroom door, accompanied by an ominous crackling sound. Fire. For one paralyzing moment, Caleb couldn't move, couldn't think. Robert's warning echoed in his mind, "Don't move from that spot," as if the punishment were still ongoing, as if obedience were still required even in the face of danger. Then Theo made a small sound in his sleep, and the spell broke. Moving as quickly as his battered body would allow, Caleb crossed to the window and peered out. Dense smoke was already filling the trailer, making it difficult to see clearly, but the glow from the living room suggested the fire had started there, likely from the space heater Robert had placed near his recliner. The front door would be impassable by now. "Theo," he whispered urgently, turning to his brother's crib. The toddler was still asleep, peaceful and unaware of the danger. With careful movements, Caleb lifted him with his good arm, cradling Theo awkwardly against his chest. The cast became a makeshift shelf, supporting some of his brother's weight. Smoke was beginning to seep under the bedroom door now, carrying with it waves of heat. There was no time to collect anything, no time to call for help. The window in their room was small but would have to serve as their escape route. Balancing Theo against his cast, Caleb used his good hand to unlock and push open the window. The night air rushed in, cool and sweet compared to the increasingly toxic atmosphere inside. He boosted Theo through first, carefully lowering him to the ground outside before awkwardly climbing through himself, scraping his cast against the frame in the process. They emerged into the cold autumn night, the contrast between the heat of the fire and the chill air shocking Caleb's system. Theo had awakened during the escape and was now whimpering in confusion and fear. Caleb pulled him close, instinctively moving away from the trailer as flames became visible through the windows. "It's okay, buddy," he murmured, though nothing was okay at all. "We're safe now. We just need to get away from the fire." He staggered toward the large pine tree at the edge of their lot, putting as much distance as possible between them and the rapidly engulfing trailer. The fire had spread with frightening speed, evidence of how cheaply and flimsily their home had been constructed. Already, neighbors' lights were coming on, and he could hear shouts of alarm as the Hendersons and others emerged from their trailers. Under the protective branches of the pine, Caleb sank to the ground, his legs finally giving out. Theo clung to him, face buried against his neck, small body trembling. Without hesitation, Caleb removed his own pajama shirt, awkwardly maneuvering it around his cast, and wrapped it around his brother for extra warmth. "Help is coming," he promised, holding Theo close to share his body heat. "Just stay with me. It's going to be all right." Mrs. Henderson was the first to reach them, her eyes wide with horror at the sight of the burning trailer. "Jesus Christ, Caleb, are you boys okay? Where are your parents?" "Mom's at work," Caleb answered, his voice raspy from the smoke. Robert left for his shift at the mill. More neighbors gathered. Someone called 911, and within minutes, the wail of sirens filled the night. Caleb sat motionless under the tree, focusing entirely on comforting Theo, who had begun to cry in earnest as the commotion increased. Despite his own fear and pain, Caleb maintained a calm exterior for his brother's sake, whispering reassurances and wiping away tears with his thumb. The firefighters arrived with impressive speed, their trucks casting red and white lights across the chaotic scene. 2 engines and an ambulance pulled up, crews immediately deploying hoses and equipment. A paramedic approached Caleb and Theo, gently assessing them for injuries. "You boys need to come to the ambulance," she said firmly but kindly. "You've likely inhaled smoke and we need to check you over. Plus, this little one is shivering." Caleb nodded, allowing her to help him to his feet with Theo still in his arms. He refused to surrender his brother to anyone else, managing the walk to the ambulance through sheer determination despite his exhaustion and pain. Inside the ambulance, they were given oxygen masks and blankets. The paramedic examined Theo first, pronouncing him remarkably unharmed except for mild smoke inhalation. When she turned her attention to Caleb, her professional demeanor faltered briefly at the sight of his knees. "What happened here?" she asked, inspecting the pattern of small, circular indentations, some broken and crusted with dried blood. "I fell," Caleb replied automatically, the lie coming as naturally as breathing. The paramedic looked skeptical but didn't press the issue, focusing instead on treating his smoke inhalation and checking that his cast hadn't been damaged during the escape. "You're a very brave young man," she remarked as she worked. "Getting your brother out safely with a broken arm couldn't have been easy." Caleb didn't respond, his attention fixed on the firefighters battling the blaze that was consuming their home. The flames had engulfed the entire structure now, sending sparks and thick black smoke into the night sky. Everything they owned was in that trailer. His mother's few precious mementos, Theo's favorite toys, the second-hand textbooks Caleb had been so proud to receive at the start of the school year. All of it gone. A tall man in a fire chief's uniform approached the ambulance, his face grave beneath his helmet. "I'm Battalion Chief Patterson," he introduced himself. "Can I ask you some questions about the fire, son?" Caleb nodded, still keeping Theo close. The toddler had calmed somewhat and was now drowsily resting against his chest, the excitement and fear having worn him out. "Can you tell me how the fire started? Did you notice anything unusual before you went to bed?" Caleb hesitated, his ingrained instinct to protect family secrets warring with the reality of their situation. "There's a space heater in the living room," he finally said. "Robert, my stepdad, uses it because the trailer gets cold at night." It was close to his recliner. Chief Patterson nodded, making notes on a small pad. "And where were your parents when the fire broke out?" "My mom works the late shift at the diner. She won't be home until after 2. Robert left for his shift at the mill around 11. The chief's eyebrows rose slightly. "So you and your brother were alone in the trailer when the fire started?" "Yes, sir," Caleb confirmed quietly. "And how did you manage to get out?" "The front door was completely blocked by the time we arrived." "Through our bedroom window," Caleb explained, gesturing to his cast. "It was hard with this, but I got Theo out first, then climbed out after him." Chief Patterson's expression softened with something like admiration. That was quick thinking. Many adults wouldn't have stayed that calm in a fire. He hesitated before asking his next question. "Caleb, did you notice the fire right away? Or was there something that prevented you from calling for help earlier?" The neighbors said the fire spread very quickly. The question caught Caleb off guard. In the chaos of the escape, he hadn't considered how his delayed response might be perceived. If he'd been able to call for help when he first smelled smoke, would the damage have been less severe? Would they have been able to save some of their belongings? Something in Chief Patterson's gentle but persistent gaze broke through Caleb's well-practiced defenses. Maybe it was the shock of the fire, or the cumulative stress of the past weeks, or simply the understanding that their life as they knew it was already destroyed along with their home. Whatever the reason, Caleb found himself speaking truths he had been trained to hide. "I couldn't call for help right away," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was being punished. Robert made me kneel on rice in the corner of the kitchen for breaking his picture frame. He told me not to move, not even an inch even after he left." Caleb swallowed hard, avoiding the chief's eyes. "When I smelled smoke, I was afraid to get up at first. Afraid he'd somehow know I'd moved and the punishment would be worse next time." A heavy silence followed this confession. Chief Patterson's pen hovered over his notepad, his expression carefully neutral despite the anger Caleb could see flashing in his eyes. "These punishments," the chief said carefully, "they happen often?" Caleb looked down at Theo, now sleeping against his shoulder, and made a decision. "Yes," he answered simply. "There's a whole system. The rice is new. Usually it's the utility closet or standing outside in the cold, or going without dinner." Chief Patterson exchanged a look with the paramedic, who subtly gestured toward Caleb's knees. Understanding passed between the adults. "Thank you for being honest, Caleb," the chief said, his voice gentle but firm. "That was very brave of you. I need to talk to some people about what you've told me, but I promise you and your brother will be safe." As if on cue, a car screeched to a halt at the edge of the gathering crowd. Fiona burst out, still in her diner uniform, her face a mask of terror as she took in the burning remains of their home. "My boys!" she screamed, pushing past onlookers. "Where are my children?" "Mom!" Caleb called out, his composure finally cracking at the sight of her. "We're here. We're okay." Fiona rushed to the ambulance, gathering both Caleb and Theo into a fierce embrace that made Caleb wince as she inadvertently pressed against his raw knees. "Oh God! Oh God!" she repeated, tears streaming down her face. "The diner manager told me there was a fire at the trailer park. I was afraid." She couldn't complete the sentence, overcome with relief at finding them alive. Chief Patterson approached carefully. "Mrs. Winters, I'm Battalion Chief Patterson. Your sons are safe thanks to your older boy's quick thinking. However, there are some serious concerns we need to discuss." Fiona pulled back slightly, keeping one arm around Caleb's shoulders. "Concerns? What concerns? The fire, was it electrical? I told the landlord those outlets weren't safe. The fire appears to have started from a space heater placed too close to flammable materials," the chief explained. "But that's not my primary concern right now." He glanced meaningfully at Caleb. "Your son has shared some information about punishments that take place in your home. Given the nature of these disclosures and the evidence of physical injury, I'm obligated to involve Child Protective Services." The color drained from Fiona's face. "Punishments? What are you talking about? Caleb, what did you tell them?" Before Caleb could answer, another vehicle arrived, Robert's pickup truck. He emerged looking confused and angry, still in his mill uniform. "What the hell happened?" he demanded, striding toward them. "Got called off my shift. Told there was a fire at my home address." He fell silent as he took in the scene. The still-burning trailer, the emergency vehicles, and finally, Caleb and Fiona beside the ambulance. Something in his expression shifted when he noticed Chief Patterson's uniform and the official-looking notepad in his hand. Instantly, his demeanor changed, anger giving way to concerned stepfather. "Thank God you're all okay," he said, moving toward them. "What happened, buddy?" "Electrical fire." Caleb instinctively shrank back, tightening his hold on Theo. Chief Patterson stepped slightly between Robert and the family. "Mr. Mercer, I presume? I'd like to ask you about the space heater in your living room, and about your stepson's statement that he was being punished by kneeling on rice when the fire broke out." Robert froze, his gaze darting to Caleb with a flash of fury before smoothing into confusion. "Rice? What are you talking about?" The boy must be confused from the shock. "We don't punish him like that." "Then perhaps you can explain the pattern of injuries on his knees?" Chief Patterson suggested, his tone neutral but his stance unyielding. The morning after the fire dawned gray and drizzly, perfect weather for the somber mood that permeated Eleanor Grayson's small craftsman home. Caleb awoke slowly, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling and the soft mattress beneath him, so different from his thin, lumpy bed in the trailer. The events of the previous night came rushing back with startling clarity. The punishment, the fire, the escape, and the painful truths he had finally spoken aloud. Beside him, Fiona slept fitfully, her face lined with worry even in repose. From the portable crib in the corner came Theo's soft babbling, the toddler already awake but contentedly playing with his toes, unaware of how profoundly their lives had changed overnight. Caleb slipped quietly from the bed, careful not to wake his mother. Every muscle in his body protested the movement. His knees throbbed where the rice had dug into them, and his broken arm ached dully within its cast. Padding across the room in borrowed pajamas several sizes too large, likely from Eleanor's church donation box, he approached Theo's crib. "Morning, buddy," he whispered, reaching through the bars to stroke his brother's curls. Theo beamed up at him, seemingly untroubled by their strange surroundings. The sight of that innocent smile loosened something tight in Caleb's chest. Whatever else had been lost in the fire, Theo was safe. The smell of brewing coffee and toast drifted from the kitchen. Following his nose, Caleb found Eleanor at the stove, efficiently managing several pots while a small television on the counter played the morning news at low volume. "Good morning," She greeted him without turning around, somehow sensing his presence. "How did you sleep?" "Okay," Caleb answered automatically, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. Eleanor turned then, her keen eyes assessing him. "Hungry?" He nodded, suddenly aware of the hollow feeling in his stomach. When had he last eaten? The macaroni and cheese before the punishment seemed like days ago rather than hours. "Sit," Eleanor directed, gesturing to the kitchen table. "Oatmeal's almost ready. I've got toast, too, and some applesauce I can last fall." The news said the fire marshal's going back to investigate the trailer site this morning. She set a glass of orange juice in front of him. "Drink that. You need the vitamin C after all that smoke." Caleb dutifully sipped the juice, grateful for his grandmother's practical, no-nonsense approach. She didn't ask how he was feeling or offer platitudes about things working out. Instead, she fed him, which was exactly what he needed. "Your mother called the school already?" Eleanor continued, placing a bowl of oatmeal topped with brown sugar and a swirl of maple syrup before him. "You'll stay home today, of course. The social worker, Ms. Cooper, will be stopping by later this morning for that home visit she mentioned." Caleb's spoon froze halfway to his mouth. "What's going to happen? With Robert, I mean?" Eleanor's expression remained carefully neutral as she joined him at the table with her own bowl. "That depends on a lot of things. The police were questioning him last night, and they've taken photographs of your injuries. CPS will be conducting an investigation." She studied his face for a moment before adding, "You did the right thing, Caleb, telling the truth about what happened. Mom's upset with me," he murmured, pushing the oatmeal around in his bowl. "Your mother is upset with the situation, not with you," Eleanor corrected firmly. "She's ashamed that she didn't protect you better, and scared about what comes next. None of that is your fault." Before Caleb could respond, the sound of Theo's more insistent babbling came from the bedroom, followed by Fiona's weary voice attempting to soothe him. Moments later, they appeared in the kitchen doorway, Theo in Fiona's arms, both looking rumpled from sleep. "Mom!" Fiona acknowledged Eleanor with a tired nod. "There's coffee on the counter." Eleanor rose to take Theo, expertly settling him in a high chair that must have been stored away since Caleb's own childhood. "I've got some banana I can mash for him." Fiona poured herself coffee with mechanical movements, her gaze distant and unfocused. She had aged overnight, the lines around her eyes deeper, her shoulders hunched as if bearing an invisible weight. She took the seat across from Caleb but seemed unable to meet his eyes, focusing instead on her coffee cup. "The Red Cross called," Eleanor informed her daughter. "They're putting together some emergency supplies for you, clothes, toiletries, that sort of thing. Should be delivered this afternoon." Fiona nodded absently. That's good. Thank you." She finally looked up at Caleb, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. "Honey, I am so sorry. For everything." Caleb squirmed uncomfortably under the intensity of her gaze. "It's okay, Mom." "No, it's not okay." Fiona's voice broke. "None of this is okay. I should have protected you. I should have seen what was happening. I should have." She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Eleanor continued preparing Theo's breakfast as if nothing unusual were happening, allowing her daughter this moment of breakdown without comment or judgment. Caleb sat frozen, unsure how to respond to his mother's rare display of emotion. "You've both been through enough," Eleanor finally said, placing a small bowl of mashed banana in front of Theo. "Falling apart won't help anything right now. We need to focus on what comes next." Fiona lowered her hands, visibly pulling herself together. "You're right. I know you're right." She took a deep breath. "We need to think about where we're going to live, how to replace everything we lost. The trailer was insured through the park, but I doubt it will cover much. And with winter coming, one thing at a time," Eleanor counseled. "You all can stay here as long as necessary. Let's get through the CPS investigation first, then worry about housing." A sharp knock at the front door interrupted their conversation. Eleanor wiped her hands on a dish towel. "That'll be Ms. Cooper." Earlier than expected, but best to get it over with. Janet Cooper looked just as rumpled as she had the night before, though she had clearly attempted to refresh her appearance. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she carried an official-looking folder under one arm. She greeted Eleanor politely before turning her attention to Fiona and the children. "I apologize for the early hour," she said, taking the seat Eleanor offered at the kitchen table. "We're trying to move quickly given the circumstances. I need to assess the living situation here and conduct some interviews. Would it be possible to speak with Caleb privately first?" Fiona's hand instinctively reached for her son's, but she nodded reluctantly. "Of course." Eleanor led Ms. Cooper and Caleb to a small study off the living room. The space was cluttered but cozy, with more bookshelves, a worn leather chair, and a desk covered in neatly stacked papers. Eleanor quietly withdrew, closing the door behind her. "This seems like a nice place," Ms. Cooper observed, settling into the desk chair while Caleb perched nervously on the edge of the leather one. "Your grandmother's house." Caleb nodded, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his cast. "We visit sometimes. For Christmas and stuff." Ms. Cooper took out a notepad and pen. "Caleb, I know you've already been through a lot, and I don't want to make you go over everything again, but I need to understand what's been happening at home. Can you tell me more about these punishments?" For a moment, the old instinct to protect family secrets nearly overwhelmed him. But the memory of the fire, of how close they had come to disaster because of his fear of disobeying Robert, steeled his resolve. "It started small," he began hesitantly, "after Robert moved in with us. At first, it was just timeouts or going to bed without dinner. But then," he swallowed hard, "then he started putting me in the utility closet. It's really small and dark in there, sometimes for hours." Ms. Cooper nodded encouragingly, making notes. "What else?" "In the winter, he made me stand outside in the snow. I got really sick after." Caleb's voice dropped to a whisper. "And sometimes, he'd grab my arm really hard or push me against the wall if I did something that made him mad." "How often did these punishments happen?" Caleb considered the question. "A couple times a week, maybe? More if he was drinking or had a bad day at work." "And the kneeling on rice? Had that happened before?" "Just once before last night, when I spilled bleach on his work uniform." Caleb's gaze dropped to his still raw knees. "It really hurts. The rice digs in, and you're not allowed to move at all." Ms. Cooper's expression remained professional, but her knuckles whitened around her pen. "Was your mother aware of these punishments?" This question was harder. Caleb didn't want to get his mother in trouble, but he also didn't want to lie. "Sometimes," he admitted. "She knew about the timeouts and missing meals, but she works a lot, double shifts most days. I don't think she knew about the closet or standing outside." He hesitated before adding, "Robert always said we couldn't tell her everything because it would just stress her out more, and she was already working so hard." "I see." Ms. Cooper made another note. "And these incidents with Robert, did they ever involve your little brother?" "No," Caleb answered quickly, emphatically. "I made sure of that. If Theo was being noisy or making a mess, I'd take the blame. Robert mainly ignored him, which was better." The interview continued for nearly an hour, Ms. Cooper gently but persistently drawing out details of life in the trailer. Caleb described the pattern of Robert's escalating temper, usually tied to alcohol consumption, and the various lessons designed to toughen him up, according to Robert's warped perspective. By the time they finished, Caleb felt emotionally drained but also strangely lighter, as if speaking these secrets aloud had diminished their power over him. Ms. Cooper conducted similar interviews with Fiona and Eleanor, while a colleague who arrived mid-morning played with Theo, observing his behavior and development. The process took most of the day, interrupted only by a brief lunch that no one except Theo seemed interested in eating. As afternoon shadows lengthened across Eleanor's living room, Ms. Cooper gathered her notes and addressed them all. "Based on my assessment, I believe this is an appropriate temporary placement for the children. Mrs. Grayson's home is suitable, and she has the necessary resources and capabilities to assist in their care. She turned to Fiona. Mrs. Winters will need to establish a safety plan moving forward. This will include restrictions on Mr. Mercer's contact with the children pending further investigation. Fiona nodded, her face pale but composed. I understand. The police want to speak with you as well. They've been investigating the incident as a potential case of child endangerment and neglect. Ms. Cooper's tone remained neutral, but the implications were clear. I've scheduled a follow-up visit for next week, and we'll be arranging for Caleb to speak with one of our child psychologists who specializes in trauma. After Ms. Cooper left, a heavy silence fell over the house. Eleanor busied herself preparing dinner, while Fiona retreated to the spare bedroom, claiming she needed to make some calls about insurance. Caleb sat on the living room floor with Theo, mechanically helping his brother stack plastic blocks, his mind churning with unanswered questions. Later that evening, after Theo had been put to bed, Caleb overheard a heated conversation between his mother and grandmother in the kitchen. He's been arrested, Mom. Fiona's voice was tight with emotion. They're charging him with child endangerment and neglect. He's saying it's all lies, that Caleb made everything up because he never liked him. And do you believe that? Eleanor's response was measured, unsurprised. Of course not. I saw Caleb's knees, for God's sake. Fiona's voice broke. I don't know how I didn't see it, how I let this happen. You saw what you wanted to see, Eleanor replied, not unkindly. You needed help, financial and otherwise. Robert seemed to provide that at first. By the time things changed, you were already caught in it. That's no excuse. I'm their mother. I should have protected them. Yes, you should have, Eleanor agreed bluntly. But regret won't help them now. What will help is making better choices going forward. Caleb crept back to bed, processing what he'd heard. Robert had been arrested. He wouldn't be coming to take them back to another trailer, wouldn't be implementing new punishments for Caleb's perceived betrayal. For the first time in months, Caleb fell asleep without the knot of anxiety that had become his constant companion. The weeks following the fire settled into a strangely peaceful routine at Eleanor's house. The Red Cross provided clothing and essential items, and Eleanor's church organized a donation drive that yielded additional necessities. Caleb returned to school after a few days, with a note from Eleanor explaining the situation to his teacher. To his surprise, his classmates were more impressed by his daring rescue of Theo than horrified by their homelessness, and several stopped by Eleanor's with cards and small gifts. Fiona continued working at the diner, but had dropped the evening bar shift to spend more time with her children. The insurance settlement from the trailer park was minimal but provided enough to begin saving for new housing. Robert remained in custody, unable to make bail, and a restraining order prevented him from contacting any of them. The most significant change for Caleb was the weekly sessions with Dr. Marina Patel, the child psychologist assigned by CPS. Initially skeptical and guarded, Caleb gradually warmed to Dr. Patel's gentle approach. Unlike other adults who treated him with pitying glances or uncomfortable questions, she spoke to him directly and honestly, acknowledging his experiences without defining him by them. Many children who go through difficult situations like yours believe they're somehow responsible for what happened, Dr. Patel explained during their third session. She had set up various art supplies on a low table between them, allowing Caleb to draw while they talked. They think if they had just been better or done things differently, the bad things wouldn't have happened. Caleb's hand stilled over the paper where he had been sketching a detailed fire truck. I did cause the fire, he admitted quietly. If I hadn't broken Robert's picture frame, he wouldn't have punished me, and I would have noticed the smoke sooner. Dr. Patel considered this. So in your mind, the sequence is you broke the frame which led to punishment which prevented you from responding quickly to the fire. Is that right? Caleb nodded, relieved that she understood. Okay, let's examine that, she continued. First, accidents happen, especially when you're trying to manage with a broken arm. Breaking the frame was an accident, not something you did on purpose, correct? Yes, but no buts yet, she said with a gentle smile. We're just establishing facts. Now, Who decided that breaking a frame accidentally deserved such a severe punishment? Caleb hesitated. Robert, right? That was his decision, not yours. And who placed the space heater too close to flammable materials, creating a fire hazard? Robert, Caleb answered again, beginning to see where she was leading him. So the person who created the dangerous condition was the same person who prevented you from responding to it through his punishment. Does it still make sense to say you caused the fire? When framed that way, Caleb had to admit it didn't. Still, the lingering guilt wasn't so easily dismissed. But if I had moved anyway, disobeyed him when I first smelled smoke, maybe our trailer could have been saved. Dr. Patel nodded, acknowledging his point. That's a very natural thought. But consider this, you had been systematically taught that disobedience would result in worse punishment. Your brain was protecting you based on what it had learned. That's not your fault. It's a normal response to prolonged fear. She leaned forward, her dark eyes serious behind rimless glasses. Caleb, the only person responsible for that fire and its consequences is Robert. Not you. Not your mother. Robert. And you know what else? Despite your fear, despite your injured arm, despite everything stacked against you, you still managed to save your brother and yourself. That's not the action of someone who failed. That's the action of someone incredibly brave and resourceful. These conversations with Dr. Patel gradually helped Caleb begin processing not just the trauma of the fire but the months of abuse that had preceded it. Through art therapy and play techniques, he expressed feelings he had previously kept buried. The fear, the anger, the constant vigilance, and most painfully, the sense of betrayal that his mother had not protected him. It's okay to be angry with your mom, Dr. Patel assured him when he finally admitted this feeling. You can love someone and still be angry with them. Those emotions can exist together. Parallel to Caleb's healing journey, Fiona was engaged in her own therapeutic process. Court-mandated parenting classes and counseling sessions forced her to confront painful truths about her choices and their impact on her children. She began joining Caleb's sessions with Dr. Patel occasionally, working toward rebuilding the trust that had been damaged. Throughout it all, Eleanor provided the stability that both Caleb and Theo desperately needed. Her home operated on consistent routines with regular meals, designated homework time for Caleb, and early bedtimes. She treated Caleb's hypervigilance around Theo with matter-of-fact understanding, neither criticizing his protective instincts nor encouraging his tendency to shoulder adult responsibilities. You're doing a fine job looking out for your brother, she told him one afternoon as he anxiously monitored Theo playing in the backyard. But you know I'm watching too, right? You can take a break sometimes. Be 9 for a while. Being 9 for a while was easier said than done. Caleb had functioned as Theo's primary caretaker for so long that releasing that role, even temporarily, felt like abandoning a post. But gradually, with gentle persistence from both Eleanor and Dr. Patel, he began allowing himself brief periods of childhood. Riding his new bicycle, donated by Eleanor's church, around the neighborhood, joining a classmate's birthday party, even reading comic books purely for pleasure rather than only after Theo was settled. 6 weeks after the fire, Caleb had his cast removed. The orthopedist pronounced his arm fully healed, though warned it might be somewhat weaker for a while and recommended gentle exercises to rebuild strength. The absence of the bulky plaster was both a relief and strangely disorienting. The cast had become part of his identity during these transitional months, a physical reminder of both vulnerability and survival. That same week, Officer Rivera visited Eleanor's house with an update on the legal proceedings against Robert. She asked to speak with Fiona privately at first, but Fiona insisted that Eleanor be present as well. Caleb, ostensibly playing with Theo in the living room, strained to hear the conversation from the kitchen. The prosecutor has decided to move forward with criminal charges, Officer Rivera explained. Child endangerment, neglect, and reckless conduct are the primary counts. Given Mr. Mercer's prior record, Fiona interrupted, sounding genuinely surprised. What prior record? Officer Rivera hesitated. You weren't aware? Mr. Mercer has previous charges of domestic violence from his first marriage. The charges were eventually dropped when his ex-wife refused to testify, but there's a documented history. The silence that followed was profound. Caleb could picture his mother's face. The shock, the hurt, and finally, the grim acceptance that she had been deceived on multiple levels. Will Caleb need to testify? Eleanor asked, her practical nature asserting itself. Potentially, Officer Rivera admitted. We're trying to build a strong enough case without requiring that, but his testimony would be compelling. The physical evidence, the injuries documented at the hospital, the photographs taken by CPS, supports his account, but nothing is as persuasive to a jury as hearing directly from the child involved. The mere thought of facing Robert in a courtroom, of recounting the punishments and humiliations under his hostile gaze, sent ice through Caleb's veins. He must have made some sound, because the conversation in the kitchen abruptly ceased, and moments later, Fiona appeared in the living room doorway. "Caleb," she said softly, "would you come into the kitchen, please? Officer Rivera wants to talk to you." The officer had clearly anticipated his anxiety. She explained the potential need for his testimony in simple, straightforward terms, emphasizing that no decisions had been made yet and that various accommodations could make the process less intimidating if it became necessary. Some children testify via closed-circuit television, so they don't have to be in the same room as the person who hurt them, she explained. And there would be lots of preparation beforehand, so you would know exactly what to expect. Caleb nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The idea of seeing Robert again, even on a video screen, filled him with dread. "You don't have to decide anything today," Officer Rivera assured him. "The prosecutor will be in touch as the case progresses. In the meantime, just keep doing what you're doing, going to school, talking with Dr. Patel, being a kid." After she left, Fiona knelt in front of Caleb, taking his hands in hers. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, her expression more determined than he had seen it in months. "I want you to listen to me very carefully," she said. "You do not have to testify if you don't want to. No matter what anyone says, not the police, not CPS, not even me. This is your decision. Do you understand? But what if they need me to? What if he gets away with it if I don't?" The questions tumbled out before Caleb could stop them, revealing the weight of responsibility he still carried. Fiona's grip on his hands tightened. "That is not your burden to bear. Robert's punishment is not your responsibility. Your only job right now is to heal and to be a 9-year-old boy. The adults will handle the rest." It was the first time since the fire that Fiona had spoken with such clarity and conviction. The first time she had truly stepped into the protective maternal role that had so often fallen to Caleb instead. Something shifted between them in that moment, a rebalancing, a step toward the proper order of things. As autumn deepened toward winter, the legal proceedings against Robert continued their slow, methodical pace. He remained in custody, having been denied bail due to the severity of the charges and the potential risk to Caleb and Theo. The preliminary hearing resulted in enough evidence to proceed to trial, scheduled for early spring. To Caleb's immense relief, the prosecutor determined that his written statement and the photographic evidence would be sufficient without requiring in-person testimony. Life at Eleanor's settled into a comfortable rhythm. The initial shock of displacement faded, replaced by a growing sense of security. Theo thrived under the consistent care of 3 adults who adored him, his vocabulary expanding rapidly and his sunny nature reasserting itself after the trauma of the fire. Fiona, through continued counseling and parenting classes, gradually regained her confidence as a mother, taking a more active role in both children's daily routines despite her still demanding work schedule. For Caleb, the healing process was more complex. The physical injuries had mended, his arm regaining strength, the marks on his knees fading to faint scars, but the psychological wounds ran deeper. Nightmares about the fire or Robert's return disrupted his sleep several times a week. Certain triggers, the smell of rice cooking, the sight of space heaters, loud male voices raised in anger, could send him into a state of frozen panic. Yet he was making progress, learning through his sessions with Dr. Patel to recognize and manage these responses. "Recovery isn't linear," she explained when he expressed frustration at a particularly bad week of nightmares. "There will be setbacks, but each time you work through one, you build resilience for the next challenge." That resilience was tested shortly before Thanksgiving, when Caleb encountered Robert's son from his first marriage at the local supermarket. Austin Mercer was 16, with his father's build and dark hair but none of his menacing presence. He approached cautiously while Eleanor was selecting produce and Caleb was helping Theo name different fruits. "Hey," Austin said awkwardly. "You're Caleb, right?" Caleb nodded warily, instinctively positioning himself between Theo and this unexpected connection to Robert. "I'm Austin. Robert's my dad." He shoved his hands deep into his jacket pockets. I wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened, with the fire and everything else." The simple acknowledgement, so different from Robert's denials and blame-shifting, caught Caleb off guard. "You don't have to apologize. You didn't do anything." Austin shrugged. "Yeah, well, neither did you." He glanced quickly over his shoulder, where a tired-looking woman was examining a display of canned cranberry sauce. "My mom wanted me to tell you that we believe you, about what he did. He was like that with us too, before she finally kicked him out 3 years ago." A complicated mix of emotions washed over Caleb, vindication that someone else knew the truth about Robert, anger that this knowledge hadn't somehow prevented what happened to him, and a strange kind of solidarity with this older boy who understood in a way few others could. "Thanks," he managed to say, "for telling me." Austin nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "My number," he explained, handing it to Caleb. "If you ever want to talk or whatever. I know it's weird, but we're kind of brothers in a messed up way." He gave a half-hearted smile. "Anyway, I should go before my mom sees. She's trying to keep me out of the whole legal thing." As Austin walked away, Eleanor returned with a bag of apples, her expression concerned. "Who was that?" she asked, having noticed the interaction. "Robert's son from his first marriage," Caleb explained, still processing the encounter. "He wanted to say sorry about what happened, and that they believe me." Eleanor's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Well," she said after a moment, "that was decent of him." That evening, Caleb shared the encounter with Dr. Patel during their weekly session. She helped him articulate the complex feelings it had stirred up, particularly the realization that Robert's abuse had a pattern extending beyond their family. "It's very common for abusers to repeat behaviors across relationships," she explained. "Often, they become more skilled at hiding these tendencies initially, which is why your mother might not have seen the warning signs until it was too late." Austin said his mom kicked Robert out after 3 years, Caleb noted. "We only made it 6 months. Dr. Patel nodded thoughtfully. "Every situation is different. Your mother was in a more vulnerable position, a single parent with a young baby working multiple jobs. Austin's mother might have had more resources or support to make that break earlier." The conversation shifted to the approaching Thanksgiving holiday, which would be their first major celebration since the fire. Eleanor had invited several members of her church community to join them, creating what she called a family of choice for the occasion. "How do you feel about having strangers at Thanksgiving?" Dr. Patel asked. Caleb considered the question. "They're not really strangers. We've met most of them at church or when they brought donations after the fire." He fidgeted with a piece of modeling clay, rolling it between his fingers. "It's kind of nice, actually. Last Thanksgiving was just us in the trailer. Mom had to work the early breakfast shift at the diner, and Robert was mad about having to eat at 3 instead of noon. He drank a lot and fell asleep watching football before we even had pie." The memory highlighted how much had changed in a year. Despite the trauma and loss, despite the ongoing legal proceedings and uncertain future, their current situation represented an improvement in many ways. They were safer. They were surrounded by support rather than isolation. And most importantly, the constant fear that had permeated their life with Robert was gone. Thanksgiving itself proved to be more enjoyable than Caleb had anticipated. Eleanor's small home filled with the rich aromas of traditional cooking and the warm chatter of guests. Church members arrived bearing additional dishes and small gifts for the children. Fiona, who had managed to get the day off for the first time in years, seemed lighter than Caleb had seen her in months, laughing at jokes and engaging in conversation without the haunted look that had become her default expression. Theo charmed everyone with his expanding vocabulary and infectious giggle, happily accepting attention from all quarters. Even Caleb found himself relaxing as the day progressed, drawn into a card game with one of the visitors' teenage sons and later helping Eleanor's friend Mrs. Whitaker serve pie with a generous dollop of whipped cream for each plate. As they prepared for bed that night, stuffed with good food and pleasantly tired from the day's socializing, Fiona sat on the edge of Caleb's bed, something clearly on her mind. "I have some news," she said, smoothing the quilt with nervous fingers. "I've been offered a new job. Office work at the medical center's billing department. Regular hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And benefits, health insurance for all of us." Caleb's eyes widened. "Really? That's great, Mom." "It is," she agreed, a tentative smile forming. "The pay is better than the diner, and the hours mean I can be home evenings and weekends with you boys." She hesitated. "There's more. I found an apartment not far from here, a real apartment, not a trailer. 2 bedrooms, in a secure building with a playground nearby. If everything goes according to plan, we could move in after Christmas." The news should have been entirely positive, yet Caleb felt an unexpected pang of anxiety. The stability of Eleanor's home had become a safety net, a known quantity in a world that had proved dangerously unpredictable. The prospect of another move, another adjustment, stirred up fears he thought he had begun to overcome. Fiona, attuned to his expression in a way she hadn't been before the fire, quickly added, "We don't have to decide right away, and Grandma's house will always be here for us if we need it. But I think it's time for us to start rebuilding our own life. A better one than before." Caleb nodded, understanding the importance of this step even through his apprehension. "Would we still see Grandma a lot?" "Of course," Fiona assured him. "And you'd continue with Dr. Patel. Nothing important would change, just our address." As she kissed him goodnight and moved to check on Theo, Caleb contemplated the shifting landscape of their lives. So much had been destroyed in the fire, yet from those ashes new possibilities were emerging. His mother was changing, becoming stronger, more present, more capable of being the parent he and Theo needed. He was changing too, gradually learning that he didn't need to carry adult burdens, that it was okay to ask for help, to show fear, to be a child. That night, for the first time since the fire, Caleb's dreams were not of flames and terror but of ordinary childhood things. Riding his bike down a hill, playing catch with friends, building elaborate block towers with Theo. Simple pleasures that had once seemed impossibly distant were now within reach, glimmers of a future where safety was the norm rather than the exception. The journey ahead would not be easy. Robert's trial loomed in the spring, carrying with it the potential for reopened wounds and painful memories. The adjustment to new jobs, new homes, new routines would bring its own challenges. But as Caleb drifted to sleep in the quiet security of Eleanor's house, one thought provided unexpected comfort. Whatever came next, he would face it from a foundation of safety rather than fear. And that made all the difference. December brought the first significant snowfall of the season, transforming Eleanor's modest neighborhood into a winter wonderland. Theo experienced snow for the first time with wide-eyed wonder, his delighted squeals as he touched the cold flakes bringing smiles to everyone's faces. Caleb found unexpected joy in teaching his brother to make snow angels, the simple pleasure of childhood play gradually becoming less foreign to him. The holiday season arrived with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the previous year's tense celebrations. Eleanor's home filled with tasteful decorations and the comforting sense of baking. A small artificial tree appeared in the living room corner, soon adorned with a mixture of Eleanor's vintage ornaments and handmade creations Caleb and Theo crafted during afternoon art sessions. Fiona, energized by her new job prospects and the pending apartment, threw herself into creating a memorable Christmas for her sons. She worked extra shifts at the diner throughout early December, saving for gifts and for the security deposit on their new home. Despite the long hours, she made time each evening to read holiday stories to the boys or help with simple decorating projects. For Caleb, the approaching holiday brought complicated emotions. The excitement and security of their current situation contrasted painfully with memories of Christmases past, particularly the previous year, when Robert's volatile moods had cast a shadow over what should have been a joyful time. Dr. Patel helped him process these feelings during their sessions, encouraging him to acknowledge both the pain of past experiences and the hope represented by present circumstances. It's normal to have mixed feelings about holidays after trauma, she explained during a session in mid-December. The contrast between how things were and how they are now can be both healing and painful. Both reactions are valid. I keep worrying something will happen to ruin it, Caleb admitted, carefully adding details to the holiday scene he was drawing. A project Dr. Patel had suggested to help express his hopes and fears for the upcoming celebration. Like Robert will somehow get out, or Mom will change her mind about the apartment, or the other shoe will drop, Dr. Patel finished for him, nodding in understanding. That's a very common feeling for children who've experienced unpredictable environments. Your brain got used to being on high alert, always watching for the next crisis. It takes time to rewire that pattern. She studied his drawing, a detailed illustration of Eleanor's living room with the Christmas tree, presents underneath, and 4 stockings hanging by the window that served as a makeshift fireplace. "For stockings?" she inquired gently. Caleb nodded, adding another ornament to the tree in his picture. "For me, Theo, Mom, and Grandma." He hesitated before adding, "Last year, Robert said I was too old for a stocking, that it was baby stuff. But Grandma already has one made for me from when I was little. She kept it all these years." Dr. Patel made a note. "How does it feel, knowing you'll have a stocking this year?" "Good," Caleb replied, surprised by the emotion that welled up at the simple question. "Really good. Like I get to be a kid again." As Christmas approached, another development added to the season's complex emotional landscape. The prosecutor handling Robert's case arranged a plea deal, which he accepted rather than face trial. The agreement included prison time, mandatory anger management and substance abuse treatment, and a permanent restraining order protecting Caleb, Theo, and Fiona. Officer Rivera delivered the news personally, wanting to ensure Caleb understood what it meant. "This is a good outcome," she explained, sitting at Eleanor's kitchen table while Fiona and Eleanor listened intently. "He'll serve at least 18 months, with probation after that. Most importantly, you won't have to testify or see him again." Caleb absorbed this information with less reaction than the adults might have expected. The reality of Robert, the actual man rather than the fearsome figure who still haunted his nightmares, had already begun to recede somewhat from his daily consciousness. The knowledge that there would be no trial, no confrontation, lifted a weight he hadn't fully acknowledged he was carrying. "Is it really over?" he asked, needing to hear the confirmation. Officer Rivera nodded. "The legal part is over. He can't hurt you again, Caleb. The restraining order makes sure of that, even after he's released." That night, after the boys were in bed, Fiona and Eleanor sat in the kitchen, sharing a pot of tea and processing the news. "I feel like I can finally breathe," Fiona admitted, cradling her mug between her hands. "Knowing he's going to prison, that there's no chance of him showing up at our door." Eleanor regarded her daughter steadily. "You've come a long way these past months. I'm proud of you, Fiona." Fiona's eyes welled with tears at the rarely offered praise. "I had to," she said simply. "For them. For myself, too, I guess." She sighed, stirring her tea absently. "I keep thinking about what could have happened that night. If Caleb hadn't been so brave, if he hadn't gotten Theo out. But he did," Eleanor reminded her firmly. "Focus on that. Focus on the life you're building now, not what might have been." Fiona nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "The apartment is definitely ours. We can move in right after New Year's. And I start at the medical center on January 5th. She managed a wobbly smile. "It's really happening, Mom. A fresh start. With a much better foundation this time," Eleanor agreed. "And I'll be right here whenever you need me." Christmas Eve arrived with gentle snowfall and a sense of quiet anticipation. Eleanor's tradition of attending the candlelight service at her church extended to include Fiona and the boys, all dressed in their best clothes, new outfits purchased with part of the insurance settlement. The simple beauty of the service, with its familiar carols and message of hope, affected Caleb more deeply than he had expected. Seated between his mother and grandmother, with Theo drowsily leaning against him, he felt a sense of peace that had been absent from his life for too long. Christmas morning brought the joyful chaos of Theo's excitement as he discovered the presents under the tree. His delighted squeals as he tore at colorful wrapping paper infected everyone with his uncomplicated happiness. Caleb received gifts that showed thoughtful consideration of his interests: new books, art supplies, a handsome winter coat from his grandmother, and a refurbished tablet computer from his mother for school projects and games too, she explained. But the most meaningful moment came when Eleanor presented him with a small wooden box, handcrafted and polished to a soft gleam. "This was your grandfather's," she explained as Caleb lifted the lid to reveal a pocket compass nestled in velvet. "He was a park ranger before he retired. Said this compass guided him home through many a forest. I thought you might like to have it now." Caleb carefully lifted the compass, feeling its solid weight in his palm. The needle swung surely to north, unwavering in its purpose. "It always knows which way to go," Eleanor continued, her voice gentle with memory. "Even when the path isn't clear. Thought that might be a good reminder sometimes." The symbolism wasn't lost on Caleb, despite his youth. He had navigated his own dark forest these past months, searching for a way forward when the path seemed obscured by fear and uncertainty. Like the compass, something inside him had continued pointing toward safety, toward hope, even in the darkest moments. "Thank you, Grandma," he said, carefully returning the compass to its box. "I'll take good care of it." The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a comfortable blur of holiday leftovers, board games, and preparations for the impending move. Boxes gradually filled with donated clothes and toys, new household items purchased with gift cards from Eleanor's church community, and the few mementos that had been stored at Eleanor's house before the fire: photo albums, Theo's baby book, a quilt Fiona's grandmother had made. On New Year's Eve, with Theo already asleep and Eleanor retired early with her novel, Fiona and Caleb sat together on the back porch, bundled in warm coats and sharing a thermos of hot chocolate as they watched occasional fireworks bloom across the distant skyline. "Are you nervous?" Fiona asked after a companionable silence. "About moving to the apartment, starting at a new school?" Caleb considered the question honestly. "A little," he admitted, "but excited too. And we'll still see Grandma lots, right? At least once a week for dinner," Fiona confirmed. "And she'll still watch Theo while I'm at work until we find a good daycare." She hesitated before adding, "I know it won't be easy starting over again, but I promise things will be different this time. Better." "I know, Mom." And surprisingly, he did know. The changes in his mother over these months had been subtle but profound. A new steadiness in her gaze, a quiet confidence in her decisions, an ability to truly see her children's needs rather than being consumed by her own struggles. "Dr. Patel says we should create new traditions for our new home," Fiona continued. "Things that belong just to us, that make the apartment feel like our special place." "Like what?" "Oh, I don't know. Maybe Friday movie nights? Or Sunday morning pancakes. Whatever we want." She smiled, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "We get to decide. No one else." The simple statement contained multitudes, an acknowledgement of their past powerlessness and a declaration of their reclaimed autonomy. No more walking on eggshells around Robert's moods. No more adjusting their lives to accommodate his demands and temper. Their new home would be governed by love and respect, not fear. As midnight approached, more fireworks illuminated the sky, their brief, brilliant beauty a fitting metaphor for the year that was ending, moments of terrible darkness broken by unexpected flashes of light. Caleb leaned against his mother's side, allowing himself to be held in a way he hadn't for far too long. "Happy New Year, baby," Fiona whispered as the distant town hall clock began to strike 12. "Here's to new beginnings." New beginnings indeed. The path ahead still held challenges: adjusting to the apartment, Caleb's ongoing therapy, the lingering effects of trauma that wouldn't disappear simply because the calendar changed. But as Caleb watched the fireworks paint the sky with possibility, he felt something that had been absent for too long: hope. Not just for survival, which had been his focus for so many months, but for genuine thriving. The first week of January brought moving day, a flurry of activity as friends from Eleanor's church helped transport boxes and furniture to the new apartment. Located on the second floor of a well-maintained building, the space was modest but bright, with 2 bedrooms, a small balcony, and most importantly, no ghosts of painful memories lurking in the corners. Theo took to the new environment with his usual adaptability, delighted by the playground visible from their balcony and the novelty of an elevator in the building. Caleb approached the transition more cautiously, methodically arranging his few possessions in the bedroom he would share with Theo, testing the security of locks, memorizing escape routes, habits formed during his time with Robert that would take longer to unlearn. The night before Fiona started her new job, after Theo had been tucked into his new bed, a proper toddler bed rather than a crib, another milestone in this season of change, she found Caleb standing on the balcony, gazing at the winter sky. "You okay?" she asked, joining him in the cold night air. Caleb nodded, his breath forming clouds in the frigid January evening. "Just thinking." "About what?" He considered how to articulate the swirl of emotions the move had stirred up. "About everything that's happened. The fire, Robert, living with Grandma, now this place." He gestured at the apartment behind them. "It's like we went through something really scary, but maybe it had to happen to get us here. Does that make sense?" Fiona was quiet for a long moment, the weight of parental responsibility evident in her thoughtful expression. "I think it makes perfect sense," she finally said. "But I also think we could have gotten here without going through all that pain. That's on me, Caleb. The choices I made that put us in danger." She turned to face him fully, her expression solemn in the dim light. "I can't change what happened, but I can promise you this. I will never again put anything or anyone ahead of keeping you and Theo safe. Never. That's my job as your mom, and I'm finally doing it right." The conviction in her voice reassured Caleb in a way that mere words couldn't have. He had heard promises before, but this felt different, rooted in hard-won wisdom and genuine change rather than desperate hope or temporary remorse. "I believe you," he said simply, and was surprised to realize he meant it completely. They stood together a moment longer, watching their breath mingle in the cold air, before Fiona gestured toward the warmer apartment. "Come on, it's freezing out here. I made up the couch with those new flannel sheets. Thought we could watch a movie before bed. A little celebration before my first day tomorrow." As they settled onto the sofa with mugs of hot chocolate and a comedy film neither had seen before, Caleb felt another piece of his hypervigilant armor loosen slightly. This moment, ordinary, peaceful, secure, was what normal childhood was supposed to feel like. The trauma of the fire and Robert's abuse would always be part of his story, but increasingly, those experiences were becoming chapters rather than the whole narrative. Dr. Patel had explained it during one of their sessions. Healing doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't affect you. It means integrating those experiences into your life story without letting them define your entire identity or future. Watching his mother laugh genuinely at the film's humor, her face relaxed in a way it hadn't been for years, Caleb recognized the truth in that concept. They were all more than what had happened to them. More than victims, more than survivors even. They were simply people, a family, moving forward one day at a time. Outside their new apartment, snow began to fall again, dusting the world with fresh possibility. Inside, warmth and the tentative first strands of their new traditions took root. The journey through the flames had been harrowing, but they had emerged on the other side. Changed, certainly, but also stronger, wiser, and most importantly, together. Spring arrived in Lakeside with a gentle persistence, coaxing crocuses through the thawing soil and painting the trees with the faintest hint of green. 6 months had passed since the night of the fire, 6 months of profound change and gradual healing for the Winters family. Their apartment had become a true home, made so not by elaborate furnishings or decorations, but by the sense of safety and belonging that permeated its modest rooms. Caleb stood at the bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of his button-down shirt, a new one purchased specifically for today's court hearing. His reflection revealed subtle changes. He had grown at least an inch since Christmas, and his face had lost some of its pinched wariness, though his eyes still held a gravity unusual for a child of 9. No, 10 now. His birthday had passed just the week before, celebrated with a small party at their apartment with classmates from his new school. Looking sharp, Fiona commented, appearing in the doorway. She, too, was dressed formally in a simple navy dress borrowed from Eleanor. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she wore the pearl earrings that had been her mother's gift for her 30th birthday. Small touches of dignity for a day that would require all her composure. "Is it time to go?" Caleb asked, his voice betraying more nervousness than he wanted to show. Fiona checked her watch, another new acquisition, part of her transformation into her role at the medical center. "Almost. Grandma just texted that she's on her way with Theo. They'll meet us at the courthouse." The plan had been carefully arranged. Eleanor would care for Theo during the proceedings while Caleb and Fiona participated in the family court hearing. Although Robert himself wouldn't be present, still serving his sentence at the state correctional facility, the day would nonetheless be emotionally demanding. The judge would review all the progress made over the past 6 months and make a final determination about custody arrangements. "You remember what Dr. Patel said, right?" Fiona asked, giving Caleb's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "This is just a formality. All your therapist's reports, my parenting class completion certificates, the home visits, everything has been positive. There's no reason to be nervous." "I know," Caleb replied, though the reassurance did little to calm the butterflies in his stomach. Court, in his mind, was still associated with punishment and separation, despite Dr. Patel's careful explanations that today's hearing was about officially recognizing how much had improved. The drive to the courthouse took them through downtown Lakeside, past the diner where Fiona had worked for so many years. She no longer picked up shifts there, her position at the medical center providing both better pay and more stable hours. The change in employment had transformed other aspects of their lives as well. Health insurance coverage had allowed Caleb to get the glasses he'd needed, but they couldn't previously afford, and the regular schedule meant Fiona was home every evening to help with homework and share dinner as a family. Eleanor was waiting for them on the courthouse steps, holding Theo's hand. The toddler had blossomed in the months since the fire, his vocabulary now including complex sentences and his personality emerging as both mischievous and empathetic. At 2.5, he had only the vaguest memories of the trailer or Robert, a blessing no one took for granted. "But," Theo called excitedly, breaking free from Eleanor to rush toward his brother. Caleb caught him in a hug, the genuine affection between them one of the constants that had survived all the changes. "Hey, buddy," he greeted Theo, straightening the little bow tie Eleanor had somehow convinced the toddler to wear. "You look fancy today." "Like you," Theo agreed solemnly, patting Caleb's shirt with approval. Eleanor embraced Fiona warmly before turning to Caleb. "You look very grown up," she told him, her usually brisk manner softened by pride. "Are you ready?" Caleb nodded, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "I think so." The family court was less intimidating than Caleb had feared. No imposing jury box or witness stand like in the crime shows Eleanor sometimes watched after the boys were in bed. Instead, the room featured a raised desk where Judge Harriet Williams presided, with tables for the various parties and their representatives. Ms. Cooper from CPS was already seated, reviewing documents with focused attention. Eleanor took Theo to wait in the designated family area outside, while Caleb and Fiona were directed to seats at the front of the courtroom. Their attorney, Ms. Patel, no relation to Caleb's therapist, though the coincidence of names had initially confused Theo, joined them with a reassuring smile. "Everything's in order," she murmured to Fiona. "The judge has reviewed all the documentation, and there are no concerns. This should go smoothly." Judge Williams entered the courtroom, a tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair and glasses that couldn't quite hide the compassion in her eyes. She had presided over their case from the beginning, overseeing the temporary custody arrangements and monitoring the progress reports with careful attention. "Good morning," she greeted them, adjusting her robes as she took her seat. "We're here today to review the case of Caleb and Theodore Winters." She flipped through several pages in the folder before her. "I've read the reports from Child Protective Services, Dr. Marina Patel, and the home study evaluator, as well as the updates on Ms. Winter's completion of court-mandated parenting classes and counseling. The judge looked up, her gaze moving between Fiona and Caleb. Before we begin, I want to commend both of you on the remarkable progress you've made. These situations don't always resolve as positively as yours has. The hearing proceeded with methodical thoroughness. Ms. Cooper presented the final CPS assessment, which recommended terminating agency involvement given the stable home environment and positive outcomes observed. Ms. Patel outlined Fiona's compliance with all court requirements and the stability of her new employment and housing situation. Then came the moment Caleb had been both dreading and anticipating. His opportunity to speak directly to the judge. Dr. Patel had helped him prepare for this, assuring him that his perspective was important and that he shouldn't feel pressured to say anything beyond what felt true to him. Caleb, Judge Williams addressed him directly, her tone gentle but not condescending. I'd like to hear from you about how things have been these past months. How are you feeling about your home situation now? Caleb swallowed hard, suddenly aware of all the eyes on him. He glanced at his mother, who gave him an encouraging nod, then back to the judge. It's really good now, he began, his voice stronger than he'd expected. We have our apartment, and Mom is home every night. We have dinner together, and she helps me with my homework. Theo has his own bed, but sometimes he still comes into mine if he has a bad dream. He paused, considering his next words carefully. I don't have to be the grown-up anymore. I still help with Theo because he's my brother and I love him, but it's different. It's because I want to, not because I have to. Judge Williams nodded thoughtfully. And you feel safe? Yes, Caleb answered without hesitation. I know bad things can happen, the fire taught me that, but I also know Mom won't let anyone hurt us again. And I'm not afraid all the time like before. That's very well put, the judge commented, making a note. Thank you for being so honest, Caleb. It's clear you've been doing important work with Dr. Patel. After a few more procedural matters, Judge Williams delivered her ruling. Full custody restored to Fiona, with no further supervision required beyond routine check-ins with Caleb's therapist. The restraining order against Robert would remain permanent, and his eventual parole conditions would include prohibited contact with the family. Ms. Winters, Judge Williams concluded, you've demonstrated remarkable growth and commitment to your children's well-being. Mr. Mercer's actions created a dangerous situation, but your response since then has shown true parental dedication. Consider this chapter closed, with all of you free to move forward without court intervention. The finality of those words, this chapter closed, resonated deeply with Caleb. As they left the courtroom to collect Theo and Eleanor, he felt a weight lift that he hadn't even realized he was still carrying. The legal process, with all its documentation of their trauma and recovery, was officially complete. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine bathed them in warmth as Theo ran in excited circles around a small garden area, his energy undimmed by the morning's formalities. Eleanor produced a small picnic lunch from her ever-practical tote bag, suggesting they celebrate with an impromptu meal at the nearby park. I took the whole day off, Fiona explained as they walked, Theo skipping between her and Caleb, holding both their hands. Thought we might do something special after the hearing, regardless of the outcome. Ice cream, Theo suggested with the confident enthusiasm of a toddler who knows his audience. Eleanor laughed. After lunch, perhaps. Let's not spoil our appetite with dessert first. The park was vibrant with spring activity. Dog walkers, joggers, young couples lounging on blankets, and children playing on the recently reopened playground equipment. They found a sunny spot near a flowering dogwood tree and spread Eleanor's quilt on the grass. As they shared sandwiches and fruit, the conversation drifted to lighter topics. Caleb's upcoming science project, Theo's newest favorite book, Eleanor's plan to start a small vegetable garden on the apartment building's communal rooftop space. Normal family chatter, unmarked by the tension and fear that had characterized their interactions in the trailer. After lunch, true to Theo's request, they walked to an ice cream parlor at the edge of the park. Caleb chose mint chocolate chip, a flavor he'd only recently discovered he enjoyed. This, too, was part of his healing journey, the gradual exploration of preferences and pleasures that had been suppressed during the survival-focused months with Robert. "Can we feed the ducks?" Theo asked, ice cream dripping down his cone despite his best efforts to keep up with the melting treat. "Not with ice cream," Eleanor corrected gently. "But I think I have some stale bread in my bag. We could try that." They made their way to the small pond at the center of the park, where a family of mallards glided serenely across the surface. Theo squealed with delight as the ducks eagerly accepted his offered breadcrumbs, while Caleb watched from a few feet away, content to observe rather than participate. Fiona joined him on the bench, her own ice cream finished. "Penny for your thoughts?" Caleb considered the question, his gaze still on Theo and Eleanor by the water's edge. "I was just thinking about how different everything is now. How much better." He hesitated before adding, "But also about the fire. Is that weird? To still think about it even though things are good now?" "Not weird at all," Fiona assured him, her voice thoughtful. "The fire changed everything for us, in terrible ways, but also in ways that needed changing." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that reminded Caleb suddenly of how young his mother still was. Barely 33, though the hardships of her life had often made her seem older. "I think we'll always carry that night with us. But hopefully, as time passes, it'll be less about the fear and more about how brave you were, how you saved Theo, how it was the beginning of us finding our way to a better life." Caleb nodded, understanding what she meant. The fire had indeed been both an ending and a beginning, the destruction of their physical home coinciding with the collapse of the toxic family structure Robert had imposed. From those ashes, something healthier had emerged, something worthy of protection and nurturing. "Dr. Patel says I don't need to come every week anymore," he mentioned, watching a pair of ducks squabble over a particularly choice bit of bread. "Just twice a month for a while, then maybe once a month after that." "She mentioned that to me," Fiona confirmed. "Said you've made exceptional progress. I'm proud of you, Caleb. So proud. Not just for what you did during the fire, but for all the hard work you've done since then. Talking about difficult things, learning to be a kid again, adjusting to all the changes." Her words warmed him more than the spring sunshine. His mother's approval had always mattered deeply to him, and her increasingly consistent presence and support over these months had helped rebuild a trust he hadn't even recognized was damaged. "I'm proud of you too, Mom," he said quietly, the words feeling strange but necessary on his tongue. "For getting the new job and the apartment, and for standing up to Robert in court. That was brave." Fiona's eyes glistened with unexpected tears at this simple acknowledgement. She put her arm around Caleb's shoulders, pulling him close in a half-hug that felt natural rather than forced. "We make a good team, don't we?" "The best," Caleb agreed, leaning into her embrace. Across the pond, Theo had run out of breadcrumbs and was now contentedly counting ducks with Eleanor's help, his small finger pointing at each one as he recited numbers with serious concentration. The scene epitomized the new normal they had created, ordinary, peaceful, occasionally chaotic in the way family life should be, but fundamentally secure. The afternoon passed in this pleasant, unhurried manner, a luxury of time and togetherness that would have been unimaginable in their previous life. As the sun began its descent and Eleanor announced it was time to head home, Theo's protests were half-hearted, tempered by the fatigue of a day filled with excitement and fresh air. "Up, K-Butt," he demanded, raising his arms to his brother as they walked toward the parking lot. Caleb complied, lifting the toddler with an ease that reflected his own growing strength. Theo's weight settled comfortably against him, small arms looping around his neck with complete trust. "Home now?" Theo asked, his voice already drowsy. "Yeah, buddy," Caleb confirmed, exchanging a smile with his mother over his brother's curly head. "We're going home." 6 weeks later, on a warm evening in late May, Caleb sat at the small table on their apartment balcony, finishing his math homework while Fiona prepared dinner inside. The school year was winding down, summer vacation only 3 weeks away, bringing with it the promise of day camp for Caleb and a new preschool program for Theo. The rhythms of normal family life had gradually become their own, the extraordinary events of the previous autumn receding further into memory with each passing month. The sound of the doorbell interrupted Caleb's concentration on a particularly challenging word problem. He heard his mother's footsteps crossing to the entryway, followed by muffled conversation. Moments later, Fiona appeared at the balcony door, her expression a mixture of surprise and cautious pleasure. "There's someone here to see you," she announced. "Austin Mercer." Caleb set down his pencil, momentarily startled. He hadn't seen Robert's older son since their brief encounter at the supermarket before Thanksgiving. Though Austin had given him his phone number, Caleb had never called, unsure what he would say to this half-stranger who shared some of his most difficult experiences. "Is it okay if he comes in?" Fiona asked, respecting Caleb's autonomy in a way that still sometimes surprised him. Caleb nodded, curiosity overcoming his initial hesitation. "Yeah, it's fine." Austin appeared in the doorway, looking less awkward than Caleb remembered. At 17 now, he had grown several inches taller and seemed more comfortable in his lanky frame. He carried a small gift bag and wore an expression of nervous determination. "Hey," he greeted Caleb, hovering uncertainly by the table. "Your mom said it was okay to stop by. Hope that's cool." "It's cool," Caleb confirmed, gesturing to the other chair. "You can sit if you want." Austin took the offered seat, setting the gift bag on the table between them. "So, I heard about the court thing last month. That it went well." He glanced through the open door to where Fiona was tactfully keeping busy in the kitchen, within earshot but giving them space. "My mom's friend works at the courthouse. She keeps tabs on, the situation." Caleb nodded, understanding the unspoken reference to Robert. "Yeah, it went good. We don't have to have supervised visits or anything anymore." An awkward silence settled between them, two boys connected by circumstance rather than choice, sharing experiences few others could understand. Austin finally broke it by pushing the gift bag toward Caleb. "I got you something. For your birthday. My mom said it was in April." Surprised, Caleb reached for the bag. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," Austin replied with unexpected sincerity. "I've been thinking about you and your brother a lot. About how I should have, warned someone or something. About how he is." Caleb pulled a rectangular box from the gift bag, a model airplane kit, one of the more complex ones designed for older kids and adults. His eyes widened in appreciation. "This is really cool. Thanks. My real dad, not Robert, he used to build these with me before he moved to Seattle," Austin explained. "It helped, when things were bad. Having something to focus on that took a lot of concentration." The gesture suddenly seemed much more meaningful. Not just a random gift, but something personal, a coping strategy Austin was offering from his own experience. "I've never built one before," Caleb admitted. "I could help you get started if you want. Show you the basics." Austin's offer was tentative, as if expecting rejection. Caleb considered it for a moment before nodding. "That would be cool. Maybe this weekend." Relief and something like genuine happiness crossed Austin's face. "Yeah, definitely. I work at the movie theater on Saturdays, but I'm free Sunday afternoon." Their conversation gradually became less stilted, moving from the model airplane to school, Austin's upcoming graduation, and eventually, cautiously, to their shared history with Robert. There was an understanding between them that required no detailed explanations, a shorthand born of similar wounds. Has he tried to contact you?" Caleb finally asked, the question that had been hovering unspoken. Austin shook his head. "Nah, not allowed to, same as with you guys. And when he gets out, he's got parole conditions about staying away." He picked at a loose thread on his jeans. "My mom says we're done with him for good this time. She means it too." "So do we," Caleb affirmed, glancing toward the kitchen where his mother was now playing a counting game with Theo while she stirred something on the stove. Austin followed his gaze, a wistful expression crossing his face. "You guys seem good. Like, really good now." "We are," Caleb agreed, realizing the truth of it down to his bones. It was really bad for a while, especially right after the fire. But now, yeah, we're good. Their conversation was interrupted by Fiona appearing at the balcony door. "Austin, would you like to stay for dinner? Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and meatballs, but there's plenty." The invitation clearly caught Austin by surprise. "Oh, that's really nice, but I promised my mom I'd be home for dinner. She worries if I don't check in." He stood, awkwardly shoving his hands in his pockets. "Maybe another time?" "Anytime," Fiona assured him with genuine warmth. "You're always welcome here. And thank you for the gift. It was very thoughtful." After Austin left, promising to return on Sunday to help with the model airplane, Caleb remained on the balcony for a few minutes, processing the unexpected visit. There was something healing about the connection with Austin. As if by forming this tentative friendship, they were both reclaiming something Robert had tried to damage but ultimately couldn't destroy. When he finally went inside to wash up for dinner, Caleb found Theo standing on his step stool at the sink, messily helping Fiona drain the pasta. His brother's delighted laughter as steam billowed up from the colander was the sound of ordinary happiness, the kind that had once seemed impossibly out of reach but now filled their days. Later that evening, after Theo had been tucked into bed with his customary 3 stories and extra hug, Caleb sat at the kitchen table working on a drawing for his art class. Fiona joined him with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, a weekend treat they sometimes shared on weeknights when homework ran late. "That was nice of Austin to stop by," she commented, watching Caleb expertly shade a section of his drawing with colored pencils. "And what a thoughtful gift." Caleb nodded, focused on getting the colors just right. "He said he'd help me build it this weekend." "I think that would be good for both of you," Fiona observed. She hesitated before adding, "After everything that happened with Robert, it would be easy to want to just forget that whole part of our lives. Pretend it never happened. But sometimes the connections that come from difficult experiences can be valuable." Caleb looked up from his drawing, considering her words. "Like how we got closer to Grandma because we had to live with her after the fire?" "Exactly like that," Fiona agreed. "Or how you and I have a stronger relationship now because we faced something hard together and came through it." The concept resonated with what Dr. Patel had been helping Caleb understand in their sessions, that traumatic experiences, while painful, could sometimes lead to meaningful growth and deeper connections. That the goal wasn't to erase the past, but to integrate it into a life story that included both suffering and healing, both challenges and triumphs. "I think I'd like to be friends with Austin," Caleb decided aloud, "even though it's kind of weird because of Robert." "I think that's a very mature perspective," Fiona said, pride evident in her voice. "And not weird at all. You two understand things about each other that most other people can't." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, Caleb working on his drawing and Fiona leafing through a nursing program brochure she'd brought home from the medical center. She had recently mentioned an interest in furthering her education, perhaps taking evening classes toward becoming a medical assistant or eventually even a nurse. Dreams she had abandoned years ago but was now cautiously reclaiming. "Mom," Caleb asked suddenly, setting down his pencil, "do you ever think about the fire? Like, not in a bad way exactly, but just wondering what would have happened if it hadn't occurred." Fiona closed the brochure, giving the question her full attention. "I do," she admitted, "more often than you might think. It's strange to say, but sometimes it feels like the fire saved us." She shook her head slightly, clarifying. "Not the fire itself, that was terrifying and destructive, but what it set in motion. Without it, we might still be stuck in that situation with Robert. You might still be enduring those punishments. We might never have found our way to this better life." She reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "But what really saved us was your courage that night, your love for Theo, your willingness to finally tell the truth about what was happening. The fire was just the catalyst. You were the hero of our story, Caleb." Caleb ducked his head, both pleased and embarrassed by her words. "I was just doing what I had to do. That's often when people are most heroic," Fiona pointed out gently. "Not when they're trying to be heroes, but when they're simply doing what needs to be done in difficult circumstances." The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Plans for the upcoming weekend, a school field trip Caleb was looking forward to, whether they should plant flowers or herbs in the small containers Eleanor had brought for their balcony. Normal family talk, the kind that had become blessedly common in their new life. Later, as Caleb got ready for bed, he paused by the window in the room he shared with Theo. The spring night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights, a crescent moon hanging delicately above the rooftops. His brother slept peacefully in his toddler bed against the opposite wall, one arm flung dramatically over his head, the stuffed rabbit he'd had since infancy clutched in his other hand. From this vantage point, their life before the fire seemed like a distant memory, almost like something that had happened to different people. Yet Caleb knew he would never forget those months of fear and tension, the constant vigilance required to navigate Robert's unpredictable moods, the desperate escape through smoke and flames. Those experiences had shaped him, for better or worse, into the person he was becoming. Dr. Patel had told him once that trauma changes the brain, creating new pathways that can persist long after the danger has passed. But, she had added with her characteristic blend of honesty and hope, the brain is remarkably adaptable. New experiences of safety and support can create different pathways. You're not doomed to be defined by what happened to you. Standing at the window, watching the gentle rise and fall of Theo's chest as he slept, Caleb felt the truth of those words. The fire had nearly destroyed them, but it had also illuminated what truly mattered, the unbreakable bond between brothers, a mother's rediscovered strength, the helping hands extended by others when they needed it most. They had walked through flames, literally and figuratively, and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but alive and healing. And in that painful journey, they had found their way home, not to a physical place, but to each other, to their best selves, to the family they were meant to be all along. As Caleb finally crawled into his own bed, pulling the covers up against the slight spring chill, he felt something that had once been foreign but was becoming increasingly familiar: peace. Not the temporary relief that came from dodging one of Robert's bad moods, but a deeper, more substantial tranquility born of genuine safety and belonging. The night of the fire had marked the end of one chapter in their lives and the beginning of another. The flames had consumed their possessions, their shelter, nearly their lives. But from those ashes, something stronger had risen. Something that could not be broken by any storm that might come their way. Something that felt at last like home.